it's the best thing I've ever done. And the
Mm,
scariest and
yeah.
the most nerve-wracking sometimes, but it is truly um, the most rewarding experience I've ever had, even through building relationships with other lawyers who also are
Hmm.
in, I mean, just it truly is just such a game changer to be able to be your own boss. And if you have the capacity to, or the thought that it might be worth it, I think Sam and I both would reach out, please. And we'd be happy
Right.
to talk you through the pain points. I mean,
Yeah.
like I have to open my own mail. So if you don't like the mail, then maybe think through
Hire
about that.
somebody to get your mail. Welcome to another episode of Breaking the Law. Our purpose here is really simple. We believe that the traditional approach to law it's broken. And as a result of that, it's often breaking people. And so there's really a need to break free from that traditional approach and establish a better understanding and move our industry towards a concept that we call better law. And that's certainly something we're really committed to being a part of that broader conversation. I am one of your co-hosts, Sam Foreman. I am a business and M&A attorney, founder of Foreman Law. The best part of my life right now is that 2 nights ago when I got home, my youngest son brought me the most beautiful artwork comprised of brown marker and lots of those little round stickers. And it absolutely rocked my world that he wanted to make that for me that day. I love being a dad. It's just a wonderful part of my life. Over to you, Ashlyn.
Yes, hello. My name is Ashlyn Lindskog. I am also an attorney, and I founded my own law firm a year ago in July. So it is AB. It's almost the very end of AB Legal's birthday month. So I
Happy
noticed.
birthday.
Thank you. We didn't have a cake, Sam, but we obviously will.
Of course.
So yeah, probably the greatest thing in my life right now. I have so many great things going on, but my 1.5-year-old is saying I love you unprompted right now. So
Oh,
she'll
that's
come into a
awesome.
room and hi mommy, I love you. And I'm not sure she's not using it as a mechanism to get what she wants, but it's working. So I'm just really loving it.
Oh,
So
that's
same.
awesome.
Yeah, it's just a really
Yeah,
fun thing that we have going on around here.
that's awesome. Sometimes I'll be leaving for work, and Hayes, our youngest, who's 2, will yell at me and be like, "Daddy, come here and give me a kiss."
You're like, yeah, with that level of aggression, I must. Oh,
It's
I
just the
love
most
it.
fun and the cutest little thing. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's
You
awesome.
know,
Um,
kids are so good at asking for what they want. I love
yeah,
that about them. Like Georgia walks up to us and she's like, hey, help me. I mean, she
yeah.
just has no shame. She's like, give me what I want. I need help. And I think we could learn from that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to transition into our conversation today about, starting our law firms, I think that is something that we've learned from.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that a lot of our peers who started law firms have learned from, or learned similar things, is to understand when something isn't working for us, and to decide what it is that we actually want, and then to go do something about it.
Yeah.
And in this broader context of how traditional law doesn't work for a lot of people, I think it's a good opportunity to kind of refresh for folks what is traditional law. Ashlyn, why don't you kind of break that down for us? Of, hey, here's what traditional law is and why it often isn't a great fit for some folks. Most
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah, frankly, all
Yeah,
folks, but what do I know?
all of the folks.
So from my perspective, from what we talk about when we talk about the traditional law approach is sort of what you think of when you think of sort of the bigger law firm model, which is bring lawyers in, set a billable hour requirement, and generally just approach the practice of law the way that has historically and always been approached, which is the billable hour and production is key. And the way to success and the key indicators for success relate around those things at the cost of many other things. And we think about traditional law in that way or describe it that way because it is apt or not apt to change. It likes
Yeah.
itself very much. It is very fond of itself. And those who are successful in that model are very committed to it for a number of reasons, I think, but one of them being is that they survived it, and they are like, if I can make the big law traditional model work, and people made it work off my back, my production, then I should get the same. And so it's just a cyclical model that I think, or you think, we think that it breaks people both in a spirit way, in a soul way, and in a family. It breaks families, and it breaks people's ability to handle mental health crisis, right. And it creates addiction. And what we are learning both through experience and through science is that it isn't the healthiest way to approach a career. So I don't know. What do you think? Is that what traditional law is when we talk about it?
I think that's great. I mean, the image I like to use is, the pinnacle of success in the traditional model is how quickly and how high can you climb, on Workaholic Mountain. And, you work as much as you can. You exchange, your time for money and prestige and accolades. And that's the exchange that you make. And what so many people find is that when they get to the top, that their perspective has been wrong the whole time, and they're not actually at the top. Instead of climbing a mountain, they've really descended into the bottom of a pit. And now they're at the bottom, and now they have to take all that money, all that prestige, and try to go and fix all the things that they broke on the way down, and try to climb back to a place that they like. And that to me is such a sad thing. It's such a soul crushing thing, because the workload that's often imposed on people in that setting is such that so many people don't even realize what's going on. They've lost the capacity to be observers in their own life outside of acute moments of crisis, because they're just in reaction mode so often, and there's no free bandwidth to slow down, take a deep breath, and say, you know what? I can't remember the last time that I was home on time to see my kids.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time that I didn't have to show up late to a ball game or miss it altogether, or whatever that may be. And for some folks, that's not who they want to be. That's not the ideal they want. But when you're constantly in that cortisol driven reactionary mode, you're not a person who's engaging in your most, high functioning strategic use of your mental capacity to, choose to be the boss of your own life. And instead your workload and your workflow is telling you who you are, and you are telling it, yes, that's who I am, by choosing to continue to react to that. And I think that for a lot of folks, they finally get to a place one way or another where they decide, hey, that's not the life that I want. Yeah. That's not the me that I want to keep voting for. And it's time to do something else. And I think when they get to that place, I think they reach a moment that is similar to what you and I both reached, which was, I'm ready to choose something different for myself and my family. And so I'm going to go do that on purpose. And I'm going to take that risk. And I'd love to know more about, well, I sense that you have some additional thoughts on this topic before we fully transition into that. So you go for that, and then we'll talk about how to successfully start a law firm that represents, the you that you really want to vote for.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts are twofold. To piggyback off of what you were saying, the first is that for some people, they don't find it out until they're forced out, until they end up in a situation, either their mental health has completely deteriorated to the point where they can no longer produce. And instead of getting, either the outside perspectives in their life, in their professional life, saying, hey, I think it's time to take a step back, they say, what's going on with you? Your hours were down this month. And then, some people just get removed from the traditional law approach without their will, they get fired or whatever. And then they realize that the environment was actually the reason they couldn't be successful in the environment, because they were set up to fail. But other situations, and it was very eye-opening to me, because I had a conversation recently with someone who was in a long-term, pretty toxic relationship, and probably very emotionally abusive. And I thought it was so interesting, because they were saying, this person is brilliant, beautiful, confident. You would know, I mean, just at the top of their game. And they're saying, it happened so slowly and so gradually over time that when I first was in it, I felt so important and valued, and like I was the pinnacle of this experience for this person. And then I woke up one day and realized I had completely lost myself, like one very small moment at a time. And, years later, I found out that this relationship had totally consumed me and changed me. And I thought, holy cow, that level of abuse, we think about that in relationships, but comparing that to sort of a toxic work culture, it happens slowly. They don't recruit you by saying, hey, we're going to churn you and burn you. They say, we have work-life balance. You will love it here. We want you to be happy. We want you to be in the community. That's what they use a lot. We want you to get involved in the community, which they mean market.
And I think honestly, a lot of those people genuinely want that. And I think some of them probably believe that about their firms when they're saying that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the evidence matches up with that. When I hear firms that, say, hey, we're great for family, and people are, share a blood supply with their cell phone and their email while they're on family vacation. And, it's a unwritten requirement and expectation that you're going to show up, on weekends at the office, and it's at the office.
Yep.
Although it doesn't really matter where you are, if you're working, and you're expected to work, the cultural impact's the same. Like that's not, that's not a great family experience.
No. And it happens. I mean, maybe in some places it happens fast, but I think it happens slowly. I think it's like anything else where you go in knowing what your priorities are. And then one day, like you said, you wake up and you're like, wait, when's the last time I said no? When's the last time I said, that's not going to work, or it's my kids, whatever, or, I haven't been to the gym in 3 years and I haven't taken care of my body, or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a family that pulls you away, but so I think you're right. And fortunately, or unfortunately, but fortunately for us and our stories is we both had an experience where we thought, wait a minute, this isn't what I want. And this isn't aligning with what it's what I thought I wanted, or where I thought I was headed. But frankly, I'm tired.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So let's talk about that process of starting a firm and really address a lot of the practical aspects of that, so that, our listeners that are maybe thinking, hey, could that be for me? We'll have some practical takeaways that they can really, really put to work for themselves. Let's start though, Ashlyn, with kind of that fundamental question of, should you even start a law firm? And why don't you talk about, how you decided that was something that was a good fit for you?
I think it was, for me, I had reached a point where I had been trying to change hearts and minds in a firm structure and trying to convince people of the value of treating people like humans, or just making changes that would promote efficiency. Yeah, it's just like, hey, wait. And I got so tired that when I decided that the relationship wasn't working for me anymore, and even when I was looking at other options, I realized that I didn't have the capacity at this point in my life to continue to try to convince anyone of my own value, the value of the way I thought law should be practiced. I didn't want to change anyone's mind. I just wanted to do what I knew would be best for my clients and my own experience. And I didn't want to have to convince anyone. And I didn't want to have to, say, hey, this is the way I want to practice law, and it's kind of different. And I don't want to talk you into it. I just want to do it and see if it works. And at that point in my life, I was just like, I think the only person I can try to make happy right now, even if it's not forever, maybe it is forever, I don't know, is me. and my family and what I can make work for that. So I think obviously everybody's journey is different. And so in my experience, I did not have the capacity to convince people of what I knew was right, what I knew was right for my clients, what I knew was right for the way that I wanted to practice law. And so I just had the only person I wanted to be responsible for that was me. So I don't even think when I started, I was like, I don't even want to hire anyone. I don't even want anyone to work for me. I just want to be solely responsible for myself and relieve myself of the pressure of other people's expectations. So that's what got me. That's what got me there. What about you? What was that experience like for you? How did you go from, okay, this situation I'm in isn't currently working, and
Sure.
I'm going to start a law firm?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I'll answer that in just a moment. So you got to that point where you decided, hey, that's what is best for me. Why did you decide specifically? I mean, I understand that, hey, you got to a place where this current situation is no longer working and I need to do something that works for me. Why did you pick that particular option over, say, going in-house or going to a different law firm or leaving law altogether?
I thought about leaving law altogether. I probably was deciding between I thought, wait, it must be the practice of law. It must be this that I hate, because I'm so unhappy and I'm so angry all of the time, and no one's getting the best of me because everything is a fight. And so I thought, if this is what practicing law is like, I'm just not, it's not a season where it works for me. So frankly, I did look at and think about, okay, maybe I need to do something else. But I had such a beautiful relationship with some of my clients that the idea of not being there for their wins or their hardest moments, like not being the person that they would call to help walk through that stuff with them, it made me like personally sad. Like I was like, wait, I want to experience, I've experienced these people's lives and businesses with them through the best and worst moments of their life. And I don't want to miss out on that. So I wanted to keep doing it, but then I didn't want to do it anybody else's way but mine. So it just truly made this situation where I was like, well, I'm going to try this because I can't sustain in this situation I'm in anymore, but I don't want to let these people go, not let them down. They would have been fine with other lawyers. It wasn't that I felt irreplaceable to them. It was that the relationships that I had with my clients, I valued so much that I didn't want to not have those anymore. So I thought, man, I'm going to lean into that a little. And fortunately, they went with me. It would have been really a bummer if I was like, I'm going to start my own firm so I can keep my clients, and then I didn't keep any. But that's scary. That's part of it. Yeah. That's part of the risk, is that you can't ethically talk to them before you leave. You can't give them a heads up. You can't be like, hey, if I leave, you'll come with me, right? I mean, I didn't. I was terrified of an ethical violation. So, I mean, they got the same letter. My favorite client got the same letter as a client I spoke one time to. That's scary.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. That was a weird transition experience. So for me, and I really liked the firms that I was at, but when I decided to start my own firm, what led up to that was my business was growing really fast, and we needed a particular kind of help that we weren't able to get at the firm that I was at, and they tried hard, and I really appreciated that, but it just didn't work. And so, the decision kind of came down to, well, do I start firing clients because I'm just working too much? Or, my wife and I, we ultimately decided, well, hey, let's go start our own thing and figure out what that looks like for us, because that'll give us a better ability to be able to to add people when we need to add people. And I was starting to see that there was just a real opportunity to do things different and better, based on some of the things that I'd identified through the course of my career that just weren't a great fit, I thought, for, me personally, but also for a lot of other lawyers. And I think why I specifically chose, starting a firm was because I thought it would work. I thought it was a viable option based on the client relationships that we had, and, the clients that I thought would follow me to, doing my own thing. And I think for people that are thinking about starting a firm, it's an expensive, long process to really get it rolling and get to a place where, it's cash flowing well, and, the practicalities of life are sustained, by your firm. And it's important to have that really honest, conversation with yourself about, is this really a viable option?
Yep.
If you've got other financial support or stability, and you've got the, luxury of kind of trying it and it doesn't work, and then you go do something else, that's great. But I think it's a really important question, if your family especially is relying on that, of, do the math, figure out like, hey, here's the client relationships that I have that I think will follow me. This is where I think they're headed, and just be really, really honest with yourself about that process, and look at the real nitty gritty details of, how many leads do I have right now that I'm working on? How many prospects? Which ones of these clients are probably need to stay here at the firm because, in my case, there's a big litigation matter, and I don't do that.
Right.
I don't want to touch that. I don't want to take that with me. I can't take that with me.
Right.
Moreover, I want them to stay here and continue to receive great service from the folks that I'm working with. Some of whom totally appreciated it. Sorry.
No,
that sounded snarky. Maybe we'll cut that out. All of whom totally appreciated that. For the record. But no, honestly, wonderful, gracious people that I worked with. But and still have wonderful relationships with. But I think that that's a critical analysis for people to make, is, can I make it work financially? Because if you do that analysis and the answer to that is not a resounding enough or confident enough yes in your situation, then you probably shouldn't do it unless that's your best option out of all the ones that you face.
Totally. Especially because if you cannot financially be in a position, then you're going to start taking cases you're not qualified to take. You're going to start doing work you're not qualified to do. And you're going to start finding yourself in an ethics position faster than, and the worst thing you can do is start a firm and do bad legal work. I mean, that's the absolute, from my perspective, the worst thing I could do is start a firm and then start doing criminal law. Like, I don't want to do that. So you gave me a piece of advice before I started my firm that I thought was unbelievably, or as I was starting it, maybe, that was so important to me, that I've held so unbelievably true to, despite, months where I'm like, crap, am I going to have enough income this month? Especially very early on. And you said, you need to stick with what you are good at and what it is that you do. And you don't have to be a small firm and do it all. You're told, like, if you're a small firm, you got to take every case that walks in the door. And you told me I didn't have to, and that I shouldn't. And I stuck. I was very, very committed to that. And that's another thing I would say is, it depends on your practice area, what kind of law firm you need. So, if you have a practice area that needs if your clients need to come into a law firm that is a law firm, and they need you to have a receptionist and a paralegal, and they need to feel like you're that kind of law firm, that's a way more expensive startup than I have friends that have virtual law firms. They don't have an office. They don't have anything. They have their laptop and that's it. And their practice areas lend themselves to that more so than others. And so it depends on your practice area, what you need. I don't meet clients in person hardly ever, except for signings, like estate signings. And even then we do them remotely. So I knew that wasn't something I was going to spend money on at the beginning. So, but anyway, the best piece, I think one of the best pieces of advice you gave me was don't take everything that walks in the door. Cause if you can't financially afford it, then you're going to take cases you don't know how to do.
Right. Well, and I think that's, an important part of that, getting your firm off to a great start is deciding what kind of firm you're going to be and figuring out what that timeline really honestly looks like. And that's something that I learned more than, planned for. On my end of things, I probably took too many things as we were getting started and wasn't choosy enough. And part of that was, just out of necessity and, not being intentional enough, planning enough, and also probably a little bit of cockiness and arrogance, which will surprise no one. But I think that the more you can kind of take that step back and ask yourself the question, not what kind of law firm am I going to be when I start, but what kind of law firm do I want to be in a year, in 2 years, and in 3 years? Because I think if you're intentional with that up front, then you can really make hay and start sowing the seed that's necessary to get there successfully at the beginning.
Yep.
I think the iteration that our firm is on right now, where we have such a heavy focus on M&A, and honestly, I think we're within probably the next year going to be one of the, definitely here in Wichita, one of the top firms by volume, at least in terms of the amount of M&A that we do. I mean, certainly by how much M&A we do, relative to our head count, we're probably already there.
Yeah.
But is that a couple of years ago? And it was a couple of years ago, we started identifying that it was a really good fit for our skill set, for the work that we wanted to do, that the finances started to make sense, that the market demand we thought was high enough, and that we could really start charting a course there. And we've been intentional with that, and I think it's working. Ask me again in another year whether it's working, right, and I'll tell you for sure. But that's something that I think has allowed us to do so many other wonderful things in building our, the current iteration of our firm, from so many different angles, but especially from the viability angle. Is I'm not trying to go out and sell 8, 9, 10 different kinds of services to a whole bunch of different kinds of clients. Yeah. We do, really, I'd say 2 buckets of things. We do general business kind of work, and we do M&A, and we lead with, hey, we do M&A and we do it really, really well. And that's what we want to be known for. And that, I think, helps us stand out in a way that makes us memorable to folks, so that we don't just become another, just another, not that there's anything wrong with that, but just another, business law firm, or just another small firm, but somebody that's really trying to bring something memorable to the marketplace. And I think that when you start your firm figuring that out, what is that thing, or at least being aware that you need to figure it out at some point of, hey, what's that one thing that's going to make me stand out? If that's something that you're looking for, that I'm going to start to build over time, because you have to be really intentional with that. And you have to understand that that's probably a multi-year process that begins, honestly, before you even open your doors, but definitely continues with intentionality from there. And if you don't do that, all of your other efforts are going to just be divided, and your impact's going to be watered down, and it's not going to work nearly as hard enough for you as it needs to. Yeah,
you have to identify your ideal client pretty early on, and then only take work from clients close to that. Because if you're too busy doing divorce cases when you want to do M&A, you can't spend any money getting your ideal clients. And then 5 years down the road, you're a divorce attorney with a divorce firm. And and you took it because you needed to pay, you needed to pay a bill. And so you're like, well, I'll just get these people divorced real quick. Especially, it just, again, it happens slowly over time. And then one day you wake up and you're not doing the kind of law that you set out to do for yourself. And I think you have to identify your ideal market, your ideal client, and then have the confidence and the ability to only take those clients and say, if it doesn't work, if we're not a good fit, let me get you with someone who is, but then don't, walk away. I've taken too many cases that I knew I didn't want, because I was like, well, what if nothing else walks in the door this week? And I have learned that it does walk in the door, and I'm too busy to take it because I accidentally took 5 other cases I didn't want to take. So the other thing I did not know about starting your own law firm, and maybe this is as a business lawyer, like what, but there's just some preliminary steps that you got to take and get some approvals about your firm name and your professional formation side of things, that if you don't do entity formation all the time, you don't know. As a real estate lawyer or whatever, I didn't do a ton of entity formation prior. I didn't do the steps prior to. I just did a lot of business advising. So when I went to set up my entity, they were like, well, you got to get your law firm name approved. And I was like, by who? Who approves it? And it was a whole thing. And so it takes some time, and you can't practice law without it. So it just, that's something I didn't know. And the other thing I didn't know is that not all banks are created equal when it comes to trust accounting and IOLTA trust accounting. Amen. Because they say that they are experienced in having your trust account. And I left a big law firm where I never even had to think about any of this stuff. But now my first couple of months in practice, I kept seeing fees coming out of my trust account from a bank that has thousands of trust account lawyers. They help lawyers all the time. And I'm like, wait, if you do this all the time, why am I the one telling you can't take these fees out? And I had no idea that not all banks are created equal. So I think that's a piece of advice that was news to me on the back end too. What I think is helpful to be thinking about is your service providers, especially if you've never owned a business before, should know how to do lawyers, not just anybody. They should know how to work with law firms.
Right.
I think.
Right. No, I think that's very wise. And so I think if I had it to do over again, I'm not sure that I would have changed anything about our timing and our process, but if I could have changed the timing and the process that we had, I would have chosen to probably start planning farther in advance, which is a little bit for me. And I think for a lot of people that are wired like I am, that's a hard internal conflict to have because you immediately start feeling like your loyalties are divided. And so I think that it's really important for you to have that, candid conversation with yourself about, hey, here's why I'm doing this. Here's how I'm going to do this with integrity. I'm not doing this because I want to steal from my employer or the firm that I'm at, or I want to cause any harm to anybody. And if those things aren't true, then you need to deal with yourself on it. And make sure that you continue to do your very best for the firm and for the people that are around you, so that you're fulfilling your responsibilities with integrity and functioning as you would want anybody else to function in that setting. Sidebar: remember that loyalty is an exchange. It is not something that belongs to someone just because they give you a paycheck. It is much deeper and more nuanced than that. So sometimes you believe you owe loyalty in a place that has not earned it from you, and give yourself credit for that.
We're taught that if you gave me my first job out of law school and you trained me and taught me how to practice law, that I owe you a career's worth of law now. And the truth is that you taught me how to practice law and then I practiced it for you. I think that's such an insightful comment, Sam. Because I know that you and I have both been there. I've been like, and
made all of this money for this other person, and then and I'm like, now which I'm is feeling great.
Guilty.
That's how it's supposed to work early,
but now I'm feeling terrible about the idea that I need to do what's best for me. And what I thought was what I found helped the way that I kept my integrity when I was making these choices is when I think you're right. I would go back and maybe do a little bit more thinking through. I'm this is going to come as a shock to you, Sam, but sometimes I'm reactive and impulsive and I'm like, I don't like that. I'm done. I know. So sometimes I'm like, oh no, that's not going to work for me. I'm out. But in this instance, once I knew that I could not sustain, I started encouraging people to take leadership responsibilities that I was responsible for before I started trying to put people in place and then teach them what I knew, especially like firm administration stuff, so that when I left, it didn't feel like I was just abandoning my post. And that made me feel better. Whether it helped or not, I don't know. But I think to your point, I mean, do you think that would have, at least in your experience, that would have helped the dynamic between I need to do this thing and I need to plan for it, but I want to do it with integrity and grace?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good example of being intentional with, understanding what's going on around you and how your departure might impact your firm, and being intentional and thinking about how can I make sure that this is as good of a transition for my firm as it is for my clients. And, one of the things I did that I felt really good about was I was really intentional with identifying relationships that, would have probably followed me somewhere had I asked them to, or would have strongly looked at departing, and was very intentional about saying, hey, I really think you should stay here and work with so-and-so. They're already in it. They're going to do a great job for you. They've already done a great job for you. I think you should finish this with them. And I felt really good about that because it did what I think we should all be mindful of, is put the client at the center of the interaction first and foremost, make sure that we're looking out for their best interests. And it was also, I think, very considerate of the firm. And I felt really good about that. But I think to just kind of tie a couple things together here, if someone had the luxury of time, I think starting to plan about a year out for some people can be really good. For one thing, it can give you the opportunity to be really purposeful with your comp cycle, which everybody's different. But if you leave mid-year and your firm is a place that does comp at the end of the year, you may miss out completely.
Yeah.
And I know people that have had that experience. And that can be very expensive and very painful for young families, especially. And so you need to be very intentional with that decision and that timing. And it can also help you plan better and continue to, a lot of times people make the decision, I think, out of a particular moment of pain. And you want to make sure that you've given it enough time to make sure that, okay, I've allowed the emotions to calm down a little bit if that's, a key part of that decision. And to really feel like, hey, I'm making this decision on purpose and with a really clear mind. But then to do all of the planning that really has to go into it and doing it well, just the financial readiness alone. Like, if you can, give yourself a 6-month runway. Not that you're going to need it, but if you're in a litigation heavy practice and you're doing contingent fee work and whatever else, like you're going to need a runway. So I think that timing is really important, being intentional and purposeful with that if you can. You talked a little bit about vendors. I know we've got just a little bit of time left here for this conversation, but let's kind of walk through some of those really practical, tangible steps that, kind of from an action item list, somebody might really want to consider doing if they're going to open a firm. You mentioned, you got to make sure that you're forming an entity, that, you're getting the proper approvals that you need wherever you're at, that you're working with a bank, and other vendors that actually know some of the unique things that law firms need and that lawyers need. So aside from banks, what are some of the other vendors that, people really need to be prepared to work with? We also work for them. Work with, and start thinking about and establishing relationships with early on.
I cannot reiterate enough that you should work with vendors that are comfortable with law firms. If they've never done bookkeeping for a law firm before, then they're not for you. If they've never, if it's your uncle and he's like, well, I bookkeep for the construction company I work for, I can keep it's not for you. And not because they're not brilliant, smart people, but the ethical implications of your money and your client's money and how all of that works. It's like so easy for that to be the thing that just like, so I would say I got a recommendation for an accountant from other smaller law firms. And I was like, okay, so I knew when I was going to choose vendors, what I was willing to spend money on and what I wasn't. So for example, accountant and, most law firms have like a, what is it? Like a document management software,
Practice management.
Practice management. I knew I was going to spend money there because my weakness is timekeeping, and some of what I do is billable. I just can't get, especially in a litigation practice, it's hard to get away from the billable hour. And I knew timekeeping was my weakness. And if I didn't have a mechanism in which to keep my time, that I was going to lose it and I was going to lose money. Well, I chose one that was a little bit more expensive, but auto bills every email, every phone call. My time, I don't enter my own time. It all gets auto billed for me. So I know who you are, and then prioritize where you need to spend your money to protect you the best. Malpractice insurance. That's the thing you need. Sam told me I need IT security. That's something I should look into. Malpractice insurance. That was something that early on we decided to, it's that sleep at night kind of a thing. We wanted to have really good insurance. We've never needed it, and probably because we've taken it so seriously. But I'm really glad we have it. And but that's something you need to plan for. That's a significant expense. It's not an expense that gets spread evenly over a number of years with most providers. It's one where it's either an annual premium or, it might be, a third at once and then a bunch, over the next 9 months or however that works with them. You need IT vendors. So practice management software, I think, is a really important decision. I really encourage folks, look at a lot, because that's going to be, you're going to live every day in that software. You're going to use it and touch it probably more than anything else, except for maybe Microsoft Word. So you need to make sure that you pick one that really works well for you.
You're not going to know how well it really works for you until you get started and you actually start using it. And so if you have the option, and you should try to insist that you do with whatever vendor you're working with, make sure you're not locked in long term, so that you have the opportunity to get in for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and decide, I hate this. This is awful. How do I get out? Some of my biggest mistakes as a firm were with certain practice management software that will remain nameless, because I refuse to speak the name because it gives me trauma.
Wait, now I have to know. Rhymes with.
It was absolutely awful. It was terrible service. The product broke all the time. It didn't do what it was advertised to do. They changed key features that severely limited certain functionality that was essential to its operation. And so you really need to pick somebody that's reliable. I love, and they should sponsor the show just because I'm going to say them. I love Clio because it's a very large provider that spends a ton of money on security and has a lot of consistency and a lot of reliability. It is not the flashiest. I think their reporting kind of sucks. I wish it would get a lot better. Clio, if you're listening, please make your reporting better. But what I love about it most is it does all of the things that I need it to do, and I never have to wonder if it's going to stop working on the important stuff. Yeah. And I think that, to kind of reference one of the things that you talked about earlier, when you're picking all of these things that are going to have such an important impact on your firm experience, you've got to optimize for your time. Pick things that are going to put as much time as possible back into your day. Because you're going to, when you're in a firm, you don't have usually, especially early in your career, you don't really have a lot of administrative responsibilities. You don't have a lot of decisions to make. There's a office administrator for that. There's a CEO for that. There's a managing partner for that. When you go start your firm, you're all of those things. And so your non-billable workload goes way up. And so you need to prioritize for time. One of the, I think, biggest mistakes that I made that you did not duplicate, and congratulations to you for this. I did my own bookkeeping for a while. Probably because I was arrogant and cheap and had an accounting degree. And so I'm like, I can do this, right? Which I was perfectly capable of doing, but it was such an extraordinary time suck that I would have been way better off. That's the other thing is know your own worth well enough to know that your best and highest use of your time is going and getting work and doing work. It is not doing the things that you can pay somebody else to do, even if that person is making a similar rate to you, which usually for like bookkeeping and things like that, they're not. It's usually much less than what you're going to be making. They're going to do it so much better and so much faster. And the amount of time, that's one of the things I would do better if I was starting again, and we'll encourage all of our listeners, hire a bookkeeper, have somebody provide you financial reporting, and have them be responsible for your numbers and your taxes.
And ask your accountant to give you a monthly profit and loss, because that's how you know what you have going on. It's tough to tell because you're like, I don't know, it's all going somewhere and I'm writing myself a check. But then those profit and loss statements give you an idea. And then the other thing is, like Sam said, I charge an hourly rate. And if I'm spending that hour doing something that I could pay someone, 2% of my hourly rate to complete, and they complete it faster and better, then the math has to math. And you have to think, and at the beginning I didn't have a legal assistant. I didn't have an associate. I didn't have any of those things because I was like, I am muscling this thing up. And I learned that I could it's not just about making money, but that I could free up my time to do the things I liked, whether that was billing more, working more, or going to my kids, taking them to the zoo on the afternoon because somebody, I knew that I was going to use my time the next morning to bill. So know that when you figured out what an hour of your time is worth really on whatever you're charging, whatever the value is, just make sure that you're thinking through that, because it's hard to not, cheap it out on the very beginning. It's just like, figure out the value of your time, figure out the value of someone else's time, and then math it all together, do the math. I don't know.
No, I think that's great.
I think your point is so important too about make sure that you are spending your money that you're working hard to make on things that are going to give you your time back. That's the value of that we have. And so you want, what is going to give me my time back to invest it in the reason I left and did this thing in the first place, the reason I started this firm in the first place. What did I want? What were my priorities? I want to invest my time, my money, those things into what gives me more of that. So if it's make more money efficiently, that. If it's, spend more time with my family, it's that. So just,
Yeah.
I just remember why you did what you did. I think my husband has to remind me a lot, like, Ashlyn, you did this because you wanted to be more available, or you wanted to be more flexible, or you wanted to work with a certain kind of client. And just remember that.
Yeah, no. And I think that that's something that I'm still learning and getting better at is capturing the right data and putting it to work for us. When you start your own firm, it's very unlikely, even if you come from a high billing practice, that you're going to be working a lot less right out of the gate, unless you just have some really extraordinary, I would say a small number of very good clients. If that's your situation, then you might be in that boat. But if you're bringing in a large number of client relationships and your business is dependent on going out and getting new ones, there's just a lot of work that's going to have to go into that. And so being intentional and on purpose with, hey, this is why I'm doing this, and tracking the data that's going to tell you, hey, am I actually over time getting towards that space? One of the things that I think is really hard to dial in correctly, and I'd give people, I think, some good advice based on personal experience on this, is when do you add personnel to your team? What kind of resources do you add to your team? I think my best advice as you're growing and you start to feel the pain point on your personal time is be slow to hire. Make sure that you've endured a little bit of pain. Don't make it permanent. That defeats a lot of the purpose, but make sure that the demand is continued.
Yep.
And then see if you can find a non-permanent resource first to try to test out the relationship before you transition to, okay, this is what I want first and foremost. Because maybe you get into it and it's like, no, I don't want this. What I really need to do is cut off the, lower margin work, the work I don't like, and just take on less work and focus more on the work I do want. And then add those resources in. But a lot of it's that doing it on purpose. So let's bring this one in for a landing. Why don't you give 5 rapid fire tips for starting the firm, whether it's, hey, here's these vendors, or if you'd like, I'll go first since I was thinking about the question, and then you go and close us out. And it doesn't have to be 5 exactly. We won't have a counter on the screen.
Okay, good.
But if any of our audience wants to track and send us the exact number, the next time I see you in person, I will buy you a beer or other beverage of your choice. But don't take advantage of me. This is not top shelf whiskey time.
Okay, go 5.
You definitely need to think about IT security. I think in today's world, that's critical. I don't think that it's this type of thing where you need to be spending, half your budget on IT security. And let's be real, you could, if there's enough options out there. But you need to have something. You need to have something that's going to put you in a position to A, comply with the ethics rules, and B, take great care of your clients and just be prudent, and then keep investing in that as you go along. Identify a mentor if you can before you get started. Find somebody that has traveled that path that looks similar enough to yours and has enough experience to be useful to you. That's something I really wish that I had sought out when I got started. I wish that I had found somebody that had started a firm like 4 or 5 years before, and I could have gone and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. And they could have told me, well, hey, here's what worked for me, and here's what I learned about it. And here's what I do differently. And anybody that's listening, if you need somebody to bounce ideas off of, I'd love to help you and be a resource for you on that. think about, things like communications infrastructure. You need really good email. You need really good phones. A lot of VoIP options are really appealing because they're cheap and they're flexible and they're agile. A lot of times the call quality sucks.
They don't work.
You can't endure bad call quality with clients with as much communication as we have over that medium. So you need something that really works there. Scheduling, calendaring software is a game changer. I just figured out how to better use my, Calendly, and it's saving me at least 5 minutes a day. That's going to save me 20 hours a year. I mean, that's big stuff. Make sure that you have, give me just a second here, really good malpractice insurance, and start to build a little bit of a community. You go from being in a place where you can pop around a corner and say, hey, what do you think about this? To being a place where you talk to yourself when you're driving in the car on the way to your co-working space or your office or around the block. And you're like, hey, self, what do you think of this?
Right.
And so having some of those close relationships early on where you can refer work to them, they can refer work to you because you want to stay focused on the things that you do best, but also people that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got an ethics question. Like I've called Ashlyn on that before, and it's been so helpful to say, hey, I'm not sure, what do you think about this? What should I do in this scenario? And business questions and things like that. It's so helpful. It makes you better at what you're doing. And just those relationships are very, very meaningful. So those are a couple of my tips. How about for you, Ashlyn?
Those are excellent ones. The first one is every process that you set up in your firm, you should write down, because eventually one day you're going to want to replicate that process for someone else, and you don't want to have to go backwards and figure out how you did it. So like this is a piece of advice I got from a mentor, but it was, you start with naming conventions. So we all name a document the exact same way, and it's client name, what it is, the draft or final, my initials and the date. And it sounds cumbersome, but that policy allows me to know when a document has been written over, what's the latest version, is it filed? And so when I went to hire my first legal administrative, I had all these sort of outlines of what my processes were so that it was easier to train her, because I already knew how I did everything. So, and that doesn't mean they can't change or adapt, but one of the first, it's such a good piece of advice, is everything that you do that is especially administrative, eventually you may be in a place you want someone else to replicate that for you. And so you should write down how you do it.
Right.
Even if it's like a specific type of law that you practice, like I have checklists for entity formation versus, guardianships and conservatorships. I know precisely what the procedure is from start to finish, and it is in a document, so that if I need to tell someone else how to do it, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. So write everything down. Keep a running list of everything that you do, so that and then you can see what you do and where you can give work away when it's ready.
Right. Yeah.
I love your point about feel the pain point for a while, because what you think you can't live with may go away, and then you've hired someone that you didn't need. And then I agree, be slow to hire and be quick to let things that don't work go. Don't feel if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And the most generous thing you can do for someone is be honest and not, feel like in your head they're doing a poor job, but continue to just allow them to fail. So that would be my second tip, is if you have a relationship that's not working for you, or it's not meeting your needs, then it's okay to move on to the next one.
Right.
Don't spin your wheels in it forever. I also think that it's okay. It's scary, but it's okay to set your boundaries and build a practice that works for you. So I have a communications policy that my clients sign, and I am very honest with them. I do not take uninterrupted phone calls. You will not call me and get a hold of me ever. And if you do, and you leave a message, you're like, hey, call me back. My voicemail says, hey, if you call me and leave me a message and ask me to call you back, I will not. Someone else might to schedule a call with me. But if it's not scheduled, the worst part of my day was always answering the phone. I hated it. And so I found a way to not have to do it. And if clients need that level of care, then I'm not the lawyer for them. So it's okay to figure out what you hate the most. And I think that's a piece of advice, Sam, you gave me too, was pick what you don't like and don't do it. And then figure out a way to make your day not suck. So what do you hate the most? And I hated being on the phone. I hate talking on the phone. So I don't do it.
I love talking on the phone.
Clients that love it,
Yeah.
Great. Clients that need to talk on the phone, I'm not the right fit. So create a culture, a client experience that you can maintain. I cannot pretend to be the lawyer you're going to call because I will never answer my phone, but I can be the lawyer you can text. I'm good with that. So create a client experience that you can live with, because if you create one that you can't, then what was the point?
Yeah. No, and to tack onto that, I mean, you will create what you tolerate.
Yeah.
If you tolerate bad behavior from clients, that is the expectation that you will create. And that's what you'll get more of. If it's, hey, we're going to always haircut our bills because we're ashamed that our work costs so much. I've been there. That's what people are going to expect. And then they're going to be, they're going to have their feelings hurt when, or not feelings hurt, but they're not going to understand it's going to damage the relationship when you start sending them bills that don't have, steep discounts on them because you've started getting better at what you do, or you've started valuing it more and they haven't. So be really choosy with that, set really good boundaries, know your worth, know your value, set it and stick to it.
Yep. And think what you might charge and then charge more than that. Charge more than that. Don't charge more than you think you should. And then the last thing that I think, and it's in my brain bouncing around up here, let me find it again, that is or was really helpful to me when starting my firm, or wish I maybe would have done better, is making sure that I prioritized a really helpful tech stack. Okay. I'm talking, do not short yourself on stuff that you need. Adobe, I use I make forms. I don't want my clients have to fill stuff out before they get to me. Having a tech stack that works with you and does what you need it to do is the thing that is going to, so what, it costs $50 a year. Okay. Well, the hour I've saved weekly and not having to redo this every single time. And this step takes it away from me is worth it tenfold. So think about what, I know that it's expensive and starting up is expensive and you're trying to spread those expenses out, but some things, man, that tech stack for me, I'm constantly looking at my tech and saying, is this working? Do I need something else? Is there something that will solve this minute problem for me? Like this won't talk to this. Is there something out there that will make it happen automatically?
No, I think that's so good. I think one of the big themes is make sure you're ready, make sure you know what you want to do, and then make sure that you've designed it to be as efficient as possible on the back end. And that takes spending money so that you can pour as much of your time and talent into the things that take the best care of you and your clients. And if you can focus on that kind of general framework, I think you're going to do really, really well. So,
and it's the best thing I've ever done, and the scariest and the most nerve-wracking sometimes, but it is truly the most rewarding experience I've ever had, even through building relationships with other lawyers who also are in, I mean, it truly is just such a game changer to be able to be your own boss. And if you have the capacity or the thought that it might be worth it, I think Sam and I both would reach out, please. And we'd be happy to talk you through the pain points. I mean, I have to open my own mail. So if you don't like the mail, then maybe think through
hire somebody to get your mail.
Right. Take care of that for yourself. But I love this conversation, Sam, because I learned something new every time we talk about it, about what I should be working on, like IT security.
Oh, same here. Yeah. Well, Ashlyn, thank you so much. To all of our listeners, thank you for checking out this content. We hope this has been helpful. Seriously, if you all need anything as you're thinking about starting your own firms or growing your firms and you think we might be helpful, please reach out. I know for each of us, we'd love to be a resource, love to help you accelerate your success and do the things that matter most to you and your clients. And thank you all, and go get busy making better law. Thanks.
Yeah.